Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Grigorian, fresh off of the Real Coaches Summit, where I attended and had an amazing time. That's my third year there. So I appreciate you having me speak in the first year. And it's been fun to see you have brand new speakers every year and creating opportunities for people. And again, being the host, the founder of that, you're also a very successful online coach, nutrition coach, and in my experience, one of the most giving, selfless, generous people in the entire industry, which is why I love having you around. So great to have you on.
Thank you, man. To hear that I'm giving and generous coming from you it's a big compliment.
Well, I mean, like minds, right? I mean, that's why we hit it off when we first connected, and it's why I like waving around on my media. So let's actually dive into some of your philosophy. So I got some questions teed up for you.
Sure.
All right. Nutrition tracking. Why do you believe people should track their nutrition?
We don't live in an environment anymore where we can just kind of wing it. And I think that's because there's such a prevalence of highly palatable, easy to access, relatively inexpensive, tasty foods that are highly processed. So they're kind of meant for us to overconsume. So, and unfortunately, calories are real and they matter. And it's no different than having a budget financially. If you don't stick within your budget, you're going to go broke or you'll spend too much money. It's the same thing with calories. If you overconsume, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, usually it's unknowingly, and that's where that slow drip weight gain starts to happen. So I think by using a tool like food tracking, using a scale, weighing things in grams, using something like Chronometer, another app, you at least now have some level of awareness of what the hell is going in. And if you have a level of awareness of what's going in, you can kind of moderate and manage that behavior better. And I saw a video the other day that I actually thought was great. Somebody had posted it. It was a repost of somebody else's. And it was a girl sitting in a car on the heavier side. And she was just basically referencing how like she was a fat girl. And this is exactly why she's fat, because she didn't understand that, coffee creamer had calories and that water flavorings had calories and all these things that were having calories. She just didn't know until she started tracking food. And what I loved about the video was that she took ownership. She said that if I was the problem that led to me being fat, I have the solution for me being not fat anymore. And I just love that level of self-awareness. And I love that level of personal responsibility, because I think now we also live in a time where, it's not the calories that matter, and it's your gut health, or it's your hormones, or it's your cortisol, or it's your trauma, or whatever else, which are all indirectly leading to you over consuming based on what your physiology should allow. But it doesn't negate the fact that calories should be understood and tracked for some period of time to understand how much is actually going in.
This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, this is, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner, which if you use tracking apps, you know this is a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example feature I love: auto-calculate food portions. Let's say you've got 30 grams of protein left for the day, and you're thinking, how much chicken breast do I need to hit that? In other apps, you're left guessing serving sizes, hoping you get close to your 30-gram goal. With Macros First, just tell it the target you want to hit, and it tells you exactly how much to eat. No more macro Tetris. Other apps ask, how much do you eat? Macros First also lets you ask, how much should I eat? Macros First is free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. And if you use the code Andrew, all caps, my first name, you'll get an extended free trial of Macros First Premium. That unlocks a bunch of features that make tracking way easier and faster.
A lot of these things function as a thermostat for, the calorie in, calorie out equation. And yes, we know that different people will have faster or slower metabolisms, right? I think Dan Feldman recently posted something about that. Guys, you want to dive into his social media. Dan was a recent guest as well. He's great. But, people will talk about hormones. Hormones cannot defy calories in, calories out, but they can be an amplifier, right? It can be harder for some people. A woman with PCOS, right? Women in menopause. Yes, these are very real considerations. But if you aren't tracking what's going on with your intake, and I don't think either you or I is suggesting that someone needs to permanently track everything. But the person who never tracks also has no concept of truly how much food is going in their system, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually stopped tracking for the rest of April. After I got back from the Real Coaches Summit, I didn't track, obviously, while I was there. And I love tracking. Just to me, I find it almost, I gamify it. And there's nights where I'll have Five Guys and fries and an ice cream sandwich, and I'll actually see like how high can I go up. And then because I'm so emotionally stable towards things like scale fluctuations and my relationship with food is good, I expect to wake up on Monday morning not feeling as good because of a meal like that on Sunday, or I expect to see weight crop up a little bit, but I know it's not fat. It doesn't affect my decision making Monday through Thursday. It's just, to me, it's nice. Okay, cool. I can eat 5,500 calories and 200 grams of fat. And as long as that's not the majority of my consumption, my weight stays relatively stable. But I also have, I'm 214 pounds. I have 10% body fat. I'm on performance enhancing drugs. I'm on human growth hormone. I've been building muscle for 25 years. So I have a shelf and an allotment of calories that most human beings don't have, which makes my life much simpler. But your average woman, especially the ones that I work with, maybe 14 to 1,800 calories of flexibility, and that's about it. So a couple of meals out per week, a few untracked nibbles here and there of the kids' stuff on their plate, some emotional eating spells throughout the week, a couple of celebrations that weren't accounted for or regulated, and boom, now you're in a surplus and now you're gaining weight. And it's not going to be egregious. It could be a half a pound. It could be a quarter of a pound. It could be a pound or two a month, but that's that slow drip is what people don't pay attention to. And then that 45, they wake up and they're disappointed and they wonder how it happened.
This episode is brought to you by Just Bite Me Meals. I work long days and I won't compromise my client experience or sacrifice my workout, sleep, or nutrition. So I needed a quality and reliable meal prep service so I could save time on cooking and shopping and have more time for the stuff that matters. Net out the cost of groceries and the service isn't as much as you might think, and regular impulsive food delivery apps, eating out, that costs way more anyway. I get more meal variety and less dishes to clean, and I've been referring clients to Just Bite Me Meals for a long time, and I recently started ordering myself. Food is great. The beef brisket tacos are my favorite so far, and there's a lot of menu choice. Your calories and macros are listed. The portions are great. You can order custom meals. They deliver to your door, or you can pick up from their storefront. And I'm sorry to listeners outside of Alberta, but Just Bite Me Meals is currently just in Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, and Fort McMurray. Ordering from Just Bite Me Meals made my life easier instantly. And you can get 10% off on all your orders using my code, Andrew Coates Fitness, all caps, on their website. That's Andrew Coates Fitness, all capitals, or go to the link and the code in the show notes.
You alluded to something I want to crystallize. You sometimes hear people rage against this mythical 1,200 calorie number as if it's somehow like in of itself this flagrant violation of human rights. Here's an unfortunate reality. People come in different shapes and sizes. Women are, on average, keywords on average, smaller. They have, on average, less muscle mass. If you have a sufficiently small woman who is sufficiently inactive, then guess what? 1,200 calories may literally be her maintenance calories. It might. At which point, the serving sizes of the world are making larger men fat. What do you think it's doing to women who feel entitled to eat the same amount of food? It's a very strong argument to get a clear idea on your tracking. Now, with resistance training, cardio, not that cardio we want to use it as a fat calorie burning tool, but it absolutely can mean that you can get more calories in your nutrition. Upregulating just activity in general, just being on your feet a lot more. I just had Jason Brown on the podcast. We talked a lot about step counts, and that can significantly increase your daily calorie output where you can actually have a lot more food, sure. But this is a reality that a lot of people have to consider. And then you think about it, how much alcohol people consume per drink, per food item on the quote McDonald's menu as a metaphor or real, like literally, guess what? It is a larger percentage of a smaller woman's day. And if she feels that this is not fair, well, guess what? This is not fair all your way into severe metabolic unhealth. What about some of the other resistance that people have to tracking? Some of the reasons are going to be very legitimate, and some of them are narratives to avoid it. What do you think is going on there? What's valid and what isn't?
I think anything is really valid as long as there's context and a level of decent explanation towards it. But where I find trouble is like I'll get comments sometimes on my post about food tracking, like this is perpetuating dangerous behavior. I had a woman the other day chime in, and her Instagram bio. The second I start seeing like multiple self-evaluations of who they are, I just know to dismiss that individual as a quack. It was like cat lady and mental health advocate and mental health professional and fitness enthusiast. Like, how many labels do you want to slap on yourself to make people know who you are?
This one might lighten people up, but when I see anti-diet or anti-diet culture, now there are exceptions. That one to me is often a big red flag because I know we're probably dealing with someone who's more ideologically rooted than evidence-based. That was going to get me in trouble. I don't care.
No, I mean, listen, man, I'm all for like the whole body positivity and like love yourself at any size, but like you can love yourself at any size, but also still want to do better and still want to lose some fat, because at some point it's not just an aesthetic issue. Like, this is what I think people don't understand. Like, listen, if you're 160 pounds as a female and you want to be 140, like, you're not going to die anytime soon. Like, this is purely an aesthetic concern. But if you're 275 pounds and 5'1" and you don't get off the couch, you can't keep loving yourself at that size, because you're going to have problems that are going to not only destroy your quality of life and your health, but you may not see 50 years old. So it's not that we're trying to be assholes and trying to tell people like you have to live this way, but to demonize a tool that's an awareness builder like food tracking and just blanketly stated as something that's dangerous or can exacerbate issues. Yes, in certain contexts, if somebody has a poor relationship with food and they have all sorts of psychological traumas and eating disorder history, am I going to throw that person into the fire and start having them track food? No, I'm going to ask them a hell of a lot of questions before I do it. But anybody that signs up with me knows that I require 4 things, and one of the 4 things is food tracking. Now, I can certainly set up a system and give them templates and say like, hey, if all 4 of your meals or 5 of your meals a day look like this, you'll start to probably get better and you'll probably lose some fat. But at some point, we're going to run out of runway. We're going to need precision if you desire more results. So I think that's really where we have to understand, is that like, we can't just paint anything with this broad brush of like, it's bad or it's good. It's a tool. If you need an Allen wrench to use an Allen key, then that's the tool we're going to deploy. If you get a hammer for a nail, that's the tool we're going to deploy. If you need to lose fat, it's an element and a consideration of calories. If we don't know how many calories are going in, how do we determine what your deficit is outside of just guessing and hoping for the best?
How long do you need someone to track? What's your ideal outcome for a client, even if they're still ongoing with you? Is it, hey, I want you to get a very clear idea of how much food you're eating, and then we can actually see how well you do being intuitive? Do you want people to come back periodically?
So the first 4 to 6 weeks with me is just like a get your shit together and let's learn each other process, because, I don't know. Like, I can give you calorie and macronutrient targets that are usually pretty spot on, but unless you're actually complying to these targets, I don't know physiologically where things fall. So if somebody comes out of the gate and they're on it, and I know, okay, cool, Miss Jones is eating 1,780 calories. She's maintaining her weight plus or minus 5 pounds. Okay, cool. I know that I'll probably reduce that by about 20%. And I don't put people into a straight 7-day a week, 6-week, 10-week long diet. I usually calorie cycle people. So I usually drop their calories 2 to 3, maybe 4 days a week, depending on how much weight they have to lose. And that way they're not in this debilitating deficit every single day, and they have some reprieve throughout the week. And I usually, on the training days, they have their normal amount of calories. On the non-training days, they have their lower calories. And if people can handle that level of variety, which usually isn't really that hard to do, especially with an app like Chronometer, which gives you like a template to use, that tends to be a little bit more palatable. But I've seen it take up to 5-6 months before somebody just found solid ground with a routine. And that's the toughest part, is like, if you're not preparing your food more often than not, if you're not eating 3 to 5 meals a day, essentially 7 days a week, well, and it's just unadulterated chaos, then I don't know what your deficit is, and you don't know what your deficit is. And until we can find that solid ground, we're not going to know mathematically where to go. But in the process of finding that solid ground, you're going to develop some damn good habits that will stick with you for a lifetime. You're going to build some skill sets that you probably never had. And just in the process of doing those things, you'll probably see some pounds come off just by default.
I'm going to show some love for my sponsor here, and you're not in any trouble, but I'm sponsored by Macros First. So,
sorry, Jacob.
And Jacob was actually at the event with us, and he's amazing. And the reason why I accepted the sponsorship, and there'll probably be an ad embedded in this episode, but I'll shout it out again, is I was using the app first, and I got to know Jacob personally. And then my friend Jeb Stewart-Johnson, who just spoke at your event, also highly endorses. So for me, it's just low friction, easy. So Now, what are some of the tactics you find to make tracking low friction?
I mean, obviously, if you're preparing and eating most of your own food, it's easy to put on a scale. It's when you're starting to do more and more meals out or social meals and stuff like that. Like that's where guesstimating is going to have to happen. So the way, like everybody that signs up with me gets a food tracking standards email. So basically, I send them an email that defines what I consider to be food tracking. To me, tracking food means you're placing something on a scale, you're weighing it in grams, and then you're corroborating that entry with an entry into an app of some kind, whether it's MyFitnessPal, Macros First, whatever. Most of them work about the same. I happen to like Chronometer because I've been using it. I got 100 users on it. It's just going to be a pain in the ass for me to switch. Sorry, Jacob.
Yep.
Him and I have already had conversation. But to me, it's not a low friction of ability. It's changing the narrative in the head of having it be a nuisance and having it be disruptive to their daily life. If you're somebody who's having to leave the day for work, right? Like I don't have to leave every day. I can sit in my apartment. I can have food in the fridge. I can go walk over to the pantry, grab something, throw on a plate, microwave it. It takes me 3 seconds to track something. I don't have to track pre-log or anything. But if you're somebody who leaves the house to go to work, and let's say 2 of your meals are having to be eaten on the road or out in your office, well, it might make sense for you to prep all of your meals and container them the night before. And as you're doing that, you can track all of it. And let's say you only eat half of it. Well, now you can just put out half a portion of what you ate that day. If you ate all of it, you can just cover all of it. That's the pre-logging method that I think works really well for most people. And by doing that, you're also setting yourself up for success the next day, because the nighttime is where more people go wrong than anything, right? Like when you have that dead time at 8, 9 o'clock at night when the kids are asleep or in bed, that's when the doom scrolling starts happening. That's when the Netflix binging starts happening. That's when the stacking starts happening. The wine comes out. So if you give yourself a task like, hey, I'm going to take half an hour to prepare my stuff for the next day, you're going to reduce your stress and your friction tomorrow, which is going to lead to better decision-making. You already know where everything falls, which makes dinner a breeze. And now you're just set up for the day. But again, a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit more of a positive attitude towards it, and understanding that it's giving you the freedom and the flexibility that you've always wanted, because now you actually know where things fall. And if you wanted to budget for some indulgences, you could.
Something that I found really helpful is if I consistently have the same meals very often, and it's roughly the same amount of stuff. So for example, every second morning, I'll blend up a smoothie, but I'll have enough for 2 smoothies. So I have one day, one the next. And it's virtually the same amount of ingredient. Now there's probably a little bit of variation, but quite frankly, across the time scale, it's going to be minimal enough if, I'm pretty on point with it. And I built it all into the app, Macros First, and I've saved the meal, right? And when you save meals, this is just, and all the apps have the same feature. You save a meal and you just use it again. As long as you haven't made any fundamental change to the amount of ingredients or the ingredients themselves, then you can just auto-populate that thing and you've got it. And it tends to also set this boundary you alluded to, where if you've pre-logged stuff, then you're not very likely to go and violate that, or at least you're less likely to. Same thing when I cook a batch of like a lean ground turkey spaghetti that I make, right? I have to weigh the noodles because the lean ground turkey comes in a prepackaged size. I cut up into 3, and then I will cook a portion of it, and then one of the thirds, and then it makes 4 meals. So good. The math is easy. I just add it all together and divide up, and I have my meal set up. I throw in a red pepper, a can of pasta sauce, a jar of pasta sauce, that is standard, a tin of mushrooms, that is standard. And yeah, it's not the fanciest, whatever, but I have to actually measure carefully. I'll put it on the food scale for the actual spaghetti. Great. I actually only have to measure one thing each time I cook it. And then as long as I meet the standard, then I got auto-populate from the saved meal. And saved meals just makes life super easy.
Yeah, I was getting some shit for that today because I put up a picture of my breakfast and I say I eat the same thing every day. And most people are in agreement that it's a nice way to live because it just takes the variety out of things and the variability and the thinking and the having to adjust. So to me, the way that I think about food, again, because I'm not deriving all of my pleasure from eating, I'm not a foodie. Like, I love restaurants. I love going out to eat. I love not having to cook my own food, but I'm not doing that 5 times a week. And I'm not doing that 5 times a week for a couple of reasons. One, I live in San Diego and it's going to cost me a fortune. And B, I don't have any control over the portion sizes, the ingredients that they use, the quality of the ingredients they use, the amount of oil they cook in. And my belly tends to be a little bit on the more sensitive side. So if I'm cooking my own food, I can guarantee that I'll feel a certain way. Now, every once in a while, obviously I take my foot off the gas and I want to enjoy my life and be a normal human being. I'm not going to bring my food scale to a restaurant with me. I'm not going to bring it with me while I travel or I go to Vegas and I go to an event or anything like that. I'm not that person. I'm not a competitive bodybuilder. I'm not an athlete. My weight is so inconsequential to me and anybody else that it doesn't need to be managed to that level of precision. But it's also because my behaviors in general are what fuel my success and how I feel. Most people don't have those behaviors. I don't think it's unfair to say that if I was to just grab somebody on the boardwalk in Pacific Beach and ask them, hey, how many grams of protein do you eat a day? They would have no clue. Or like, hey, do you eat 4 times a day? And what do those 4 meals look like? They'd be like, well, I eat one meal today and I'll eat 3 meals tomorrow. And I might have nothing on Friday until dinner. Like there's no level of routine or regularity. So as much as the semantics and the details of calories and macros matter to me, I want to see people exemplify a routine before I ever micromanage any of those variables with them.
Something else that I changed recently, and again, they're another sponsor, is it's a local company, Just Bite Me Meals. And I'm going to shout them up. I shout them out. They're like, holy shit, has this been life-changing? And obviously all the macros are listed on the things. They're really easy to deal with. The delivery service is great. You know, you can kind of pick what half of the day it arrives at. And I actually want to get in this narrative about people, you know, feel like they can't eat the same meal over and over. But yeah, I can order a variety of stuff. And it's been great for me. And also I find this like they're slightly smaller portions than what I tend to cook anyway. And so it actually sets a little bit of a boundary around just the size of the food I'm eating. I'm going to side tangent here. You made me think of, so I was down in Calgary for the weekend to go see Bush and Filter in concert. And me and a good buddy of mine went down. And so for breakfast, before we drove back up to Edmonton, we went to a place called Stacked Pancakes. I'd never tried it before. Just found out there's one here. Anyway, so, you know, and I like having pancakes once in a while. I ordered an omelet pancakes. These pancakes were enormous. And it said there was 1,100 calories. I was shocked to see it like anywhere near that low. They're pancakes, but the word cake in there, this was fucking cake. Okay, this is literally cake. These were huge. I only ate half it. I boxed it up and came back and ate the rest of it later in the day after a workout. They were good, but my God, they were rich. It tastes like cake. So holy shit, right? Anybody who eats there regularly, like, hey, a treat, great, but like regularly eating there, holy shit, you're not gonna be able to keep weight off. And then I discovered there's one here, so I'm like, oh no, shit, right?
Is it a chain? Is it a chain?
It's obviously a chain because there's multiple ones down in Calgary. So anyway, like it's like IHOP or wherever else you go. Okay. But you know, I have to have a boundary on that. Okay, so now the whole narrative not eating the same food on multiple days. I have definitely found that, and I use the word narrative very deliberately. It's a belief. People will say either A, I don't like, you know, leftovers. I don't like heated up food, or I don't like eating the same thing multiple days in a row. I believe it is a belief in a narrative that someone has constructed that makes it harder for them to do the batch meal cooking thing. I think there's probably a lot more going on there. What do you think's going on there? Can you break this narrative down for someone who struggles with this?
I think any of those things, any of those, I call them self-limiting beliefs, are internal narratives that have become truths because you've said them to yourself long enough. I mean, I don't particularly love eating reheated food either, but I think my day is more than just what I put in my mouth. Like I have a business to run. I have people that I love. I have things I want to do and activities to like, there's so much more to life than just what I'm going to put in my mouth next. So for me, it's so low on the totem pole of importance. The way that I think about, and again, this goes back to the relationship that somebody has with food. What are most people struggling from? They're struggling from unresolved traumas, poor communication with their spouse, not being authentic to themselves, you know, maybe disordered relationships with food from the past because of what they saw at home. All of this collectively is what then creates these narratives in their head. And then they become prisons essentially, because now you can't get out of your own way. It's like, well, I can't eat. Like I used to work with a guy, one of the first clients I ever had. He's like, I refuse to eat anything that's reheated. I said, okay, what are you willing to do? That I had to meet him at that point. I'm like, what are you actually willing to do? Because you have a significant, I mean, this guy had probably about 100 pounds to lose. He was in the 400 range. I'm like, at some point, this narrative that you're living in is going to be the thing that kills you and destroys your quality of life. And it's going to be uncomfortable, man. I get it. Like it sucks. Like anytime you're changing habits, behaviors, lifestyles, anytime you're altering your mental health in any kind of way, it's going to be the toughest thing you'll ever endure as a human being because you're rewiring the plasticity of your brain, but you're not incapable of it. So I think as long as you're empowering people to know that, hey, there are alternatives out there, this doesn't have to be your prison. Try dipping your toes in the water before fully jumping in the pool. So maybe instead of eating 4 meals a day microwave, you're going to eat 1 meal a day microwave. Instead of eating 7 days a week of microwave food, you're going to eat 3 days a week of microwave food. But at some point, you're going to have to understand that if you're not the person controlling your calories, or you're not living within some type of a framework, you're going to keep struggling. And what's worse, not liking how you look and feel every single day and fighting that fight, and then eventually developing a metabolic disease that's going to kill you, or going through the uncomfortable process of behavior change, which in about 60 to 80 days can occur.
And I love zooming in on the fact that these are, in fact, narratives. And it's why I use that word, beliefs and narratives, because I guess the question is in that individual, this could be sort of a rhetorical statement, but, or metaphor for people like that. Are they turning around and they're cooking a fresh meal at home a couple of times a day, or are they just rotating, ordering out different types of takeout the whole time? And is it a narrative that deflects from the effort and accountability, the personal responsibility, which of course is this almost taboo thing in some circles in our industry? And is it just a way to deflect? And I like not necessarily attacking someone's narratives, because you have to build trust with the person right in front of you first with the client, but to get them to consider the fact that it may not be an absolute truth, but it is in fact a narrative. It's a story that they've constructed. And that's the first step towards an open mind towards changing the narrative, because all behavior change that we work with anybody on is usually overcoming narratives and beliefs and getting people to rewrite them.
So I'll give you a great example, and you know me because you've seen me at 100 different conferences. So my narrative for every conference I used to ever go to was, I have to go to the strip club at night by myself, right? Like, that. I've talked about it before. Yeah, that was my narrative. Like, that was the thing. It's not what I looked forward to the most at events, but it's what I always expected to do every single time. And that was a narrative that I literally programmed into my brain. I would get, I would go to the happy hour or whatever event I was. I would drink enough to start to feel loose, and then I would take an Uber by myself to whatever local strip club there was, and I wouldn't be found until 2 a.m. And then I would show up to the event the next day, and everybody would laugh at me, and we'd talk about it. I changed that narrative at the Silverback Summit last year. I was the first event in that year, in the last few years, that I didn't drink at whatsoever. I had the most amazing time. I met more people than ever. I connected with more people than ever. I felt more present than ever. I obviously wasn't hungover at all. And it was uncomfortable. Like, it was weird, right? Like, it was weird to have to change this belief system that I've had for 5 years, and almost like this tradition ritual that I developed for myself. But then when I actually saw the positive value of it, I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I can be in the driver's seat of either decision that I want to make. And that should hopefully at least empower folks to understand that just because you believe something to be true doesn't mean that you can't challenge it, and doesn't mean that you can't benefit from challenging it. Like, it might be hard, but like something like reheating food isn't going to make or break your life. Something like preparing your food isn't going to be the thing that destroys your week. I think people have much bigger problems. And I think when you actually challenge them, because the whole food variety thing, I think is actually kind of horseshit. Dude, like, think about it. Every time you walk into a restaurant, most people order the same thing. They get the same coffee the same way every single morning. They get the same pastry at the coffee place every single morning. They order the same lunch at the same place every single afternoon. So it's like, you as soon as somebody imposes rigidity on you, or perceived rigidity, you fight it. But when it's your own rigidity that you have, or your own routines, it's not rigid anymore. So I think it just comes down to perception. And once you start to at least illuminate that to people, hopefully then it's up to them to be able to make those changes.
I think on some level, putting these things on autopilot and the rigidity is a type of absolution from the responsibility for change or the outcome of the action. And I think it's rooted in, it can be very disempowering. And I think our industry, there's a corner of our industry just gets really disempowering with this messaging. It's like, oh, it's not your fault. And I don't believe in fault, but it's not your responsibility. Here are all these, complex reasons why, it's very, very hard and you probably can't statistically change. I hate that stuff, because it's it's so disempowering. And I think a lot of times people will line up for this kind of messaging because it's fake empathy. It's presented often in a very empathetic way. And I'm a hard ass about this. Anybody who listens to me knows I rip on this stuff. I think you have a lot of performative narcissists masquerading as empathetic figures in our industry. Not all of them, but there are some of these people. And I could see right through these people the moment that you post something that goes against them, because they go into attack mode. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's status seeking behavior within your tribal ideology. And you see that the fangs come out and these are not empathetic people. These are grifters and narcissists. And that is a hill I will die on. So I just like to caution people about these type of figures, because you get in their orbit and you succumb to the messaging, and it can remove a lot of personal responsibility. It can give you this comforting lie. And then all of a sudden you slip into greater and greater metabolic health because you believe, well, it's all beyond my control. So you and I are all about empathetic empowerment and giving people back a sense of control, not beating them over the head with like too much tough love. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit, because I had something planned and I saw this video. So speaking of one of the people who I think does it right, is really empathetic, is my friend James Capola. He was on a podcast episode with me recently. He's a beauty. I'm trying to drag him out to more, events soon. But he shared something, and I will name, I normally don't shout names, but a guy named Andy Elliott, who's a sort of like used car salesman turned public speaking guru. You go down the rabbit hole. This guy seems to be in a fair bit of trouble at various times. And this idiot brought his two daughters, 9 and 12, on stage in a video. Really? And he was like getting them to show off their abs, and how he had basically told them that they needed to have abs. Because this guy's whole stick is he's big time car industry guy. So he gets car salespeople to come to his events and then demands they take their shirt off, and shames them for being fat and out of shape, and demeans them because they don't have the discipline to, have a six pack, as if that's necessary to be blah, 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 whatever. So James, of course, just lit him the fuck up. And I thought, oh my God, I can't even imagine what the kind of conditioning that these girls, the body dysmorphia condition these girls are at risk of developing as they get older. So, and what I had planned was, this quote from you: fashion magazines messed you up. So did your mom and the way she spoke about weight and food. So has social media, as an example. So have societal narratives about how women should act. But all that conditioning, you can still rewrite your story. I want you to dive into that.
Well, I mean, I work with mostly women, and most of the women I work with have had some previous messaging from somewhere about you should be this. Now, I get it. You grew up in a kind of a hard-nosed blue-collar family, very similar to me. Our fathers probably pushed some shit on us that we had to live with for a while. My father was
you know what? I'm lucky because my mom listens to this stuff. Mom's a teacher. Dad's always been a business owner, entrepreneur. I'm still writing a piece that I got to share. I was blessed. So what you're talking about is real, but I'm going to give my parents a shout. They were way ahead of the curve. They positively supported me and my brothers to get involved in sports. They modeled behavior. My parents are incredible swimmers. They played music. They were cross-country skiers. I got in cross-country skiing when I was young, my mom being the teacher. We had a tiny town in northern Newfoundland, and there was no basketball coach half the time. So mom would literally just stay a couple extra hours and work on stuff and let me and my brother run the basketball team and be in the gymnasium. I was blessed. Mom and dad, they would, home cooked breakfast, oatmeal every morning. They would have home cooked lunch and dinner. And yeah, I was lucky. Not every parent has the opportunity to live in a small town. You're near the school. And then, there would be sensible boundaries where I was allowed to have $5. And again, this is 40, 38 to 40 years ago when I was a little kid, right? And, $5, it would go a long way. I could get a can of pop, a bag of chips, a couple of chocolate bars on Friday. That was my allowance. And, so there was room for that, but we didn't have that too often. Every once in a blue moon, they'd get pizza or something. We'd have some Coke with it, but soft drinks were not normal part of, normal meals. So I think my parents were just superheroes and way ahead of the curve. And that has a profound effect. Now, back to your point, because a lot of people do grow up with the environment you described.
Right. What I was going to say was growing up in a Soviet household where you weren't really allowed to talk about your feelings or communicate, or that was a sign of weakness. It was almost the same way that a lot of women that I work with have grown up, which is mom is always talking about her weight or referencing to food as good or bad, or don't eat that because it's going to make you fat, or you should eat less of this, or they were putting these arbitrary rules on stuff because their parents didn't know any better. And they grew up kind of in that Jenny Craig Weight Watchers era where, you know, it was low fat, then it was low carb, then it was, you know, let's cut out ice chips also.
There's a perfect metaphor for this. And there's a recent quote, I can't remember who said it, but it's about Oprah. And I've long been very harsh on Oprah for just the magnitude of her platform and the damage she's done. But Oprah is, quote, the greatest perpetuator of diet culture, but also a victim of it, which is a perfect encapsulation of it.
Yeah, I mean, she's lost the game at what, a couple 100 pounds at some point in her life,
and propagated however many different fad diets that turned out to be both individually problematic and the pattern of behavior is highly, highly problematic.
But here's the thing too, and I think as long as you have a working rational brain to some degree, like there is some personal responsibility about the way that you consume media, right? I don't always like to say this. I don't like the narrative of misinformation being dangerous because it's the same narrative as like guns kill people, right? Like we can go down that rabbit hole.
This is the Russian immigrant getting out of that world, the other side of the Iron Curtain, probably talking here, right? It probably terrifies the living hell out of you. And this gets socio-political, but some of the stuff you see now, I don't want to go there, but
I don't, dude, I'm the most furthest removed from, I don't even know what's going on in my own country as far as politics are concerned. I'm so insulated. I live in a place that's between 50 and 80 degrees every day. I live 20 minutes from the beach. I made this decision very intentionally. I pay attention to my business. I pay attention to my family, my loved ones, and I don't pay attention to anything else because I can't control anything.
Very
and
wise.
I think when it comes to women and women's size or women's shape, like a guy can put on 20, 30 pounds and nobody says shit. Nobody says shit. His buddies might say something to him and break his balls, but nobody's really going to say anything. A woman puts on any noticeable amount of weight and the commentary just starts. And it comes from all sorts of, it comes from family, it comes from relatives, it comes from friends, it comes from coworkers, and they're just surrounded by it. So I can see why weight and body image is such a sensitive subject for women. And I get it. Like, I understand why it can be so damaging. So nobody ever taught women that it's okay to be a certain weight or your weight doesn't define your worth or all these other, you know, kind of almost cliche things that we can say. But strength training wasn't really a thing until recently. Protein wasn't really a thing until recently. All of these things are relatively new advents or at least new conversations. I mean, shit, even menopause wasn't talked about 10 years ago the way it is now. And now there's almost too much of a spotlight on it. So like everything, like the pendulum of information keeps swinging from place to place and there's never any neutrality to it. It's always like, it's either really, really good or it's really, really bad. And we all have to either pay attention to it or run away from it, as opposed to like, it depends constantly. There is no definitive answer to anything outside of the fact that strength training is going to benefit almost everybody that does it. Most people should probably eat more protein. Most people should probably eat more vegetables and fruit. And if you don't make processed foods the majority of your consumption, you'll probably be okay and have more longevity. Sleep well, stress less, walk more. Like these are all just blanket statements that I think everybody can agree on. But then there's also individual nuance. Like, how does that woman who watched her mother step on a scale 7 times a day feel about her weight? You know, how does she associate cookies being on the top shelf of the cupboard because that's where her mother used to hide them, just to be able to get them out of sight from people? Like, these are all things that people grew up with, and like that whole nature versus nurture thing is real. I had no regulation of food in my house. My parents were never home. They worked 3 jobs apiece my whole life until I was in my late teens. So I would come home from the bus at 9 years old, and my lunch every single day at 3 o'clock was an 8-pack of hot dogs with 4 buns, 4 without buns, and I would put them on the George Foreman grill 4 at a time, and I would finish almost a 2-liter bottle of soda. And there was no restriction in my house. My parents were like, you want a croissant? Eat it. You want cake? Eat it. You want chips? Eat it. You want to go to McDonald's? We'll go. Like, they didn't give a shit. But I also realized at a very young age that, like, I like to be active, and I was a little body conscious, and I was kind of that strange Russian kid that people were making fun of. And I found weightlifting as an outlet to confidence. So I was able to find some levity by being a class clown and joking around with people and not taking stuff too seriously. But women don't have that opportunity, right? Women internalize a lot of this stuff, and they're getting it from some of their best friends who are supposed to be their best friends, but they're making fun of them to their face about their size. And they can't escape any of it because then they come home and then they see it from their mother. Then they flip open on social media now on their phones and they see 95 different images of a woman who's emaciated or, this woman is saying that you should do this to look like this, and this woman is saying you should do this to look like that. And there's just so much stuff that a woman has to deal with that a man will never have to deal with. Men have other issues, of course, but it's never going to be to the degree that women are having to deal with it. So I think as long as women understand that they have to make the choice about what they want in their lives and they don't have to listen to anybody else, because here's the truth. Most women who want that physique that they're talking about probably weighs more than they think it weighs. You've seen it, dude. How many women have you trained who, maybe they were 165 pounds and they put on 5 pounds and finally look like that muscular woman they've always wanted to look like? Or, the woman that's 180 pounds, who's 5'9", who's really athletic. And the second she started actually progressively overload strength training, she started to see shoulder muscles in quad definition. She's like, holy shit, this is working, but I'm heavier. So
And her waist looks smaller by comparison to the muscles that are built, right?
Yeah. And I'm really happy that the tide is changing in that direction, because it's so fun working with women who, when that light bulb goes off and that confidence turns on, there's just no going back. They can't unsee it. They can't undo it. And it's just full steam ahead in the right direction now, because now they're finally on the right track. But there's so much resistance, and there's so much psychology, and there's so much socioeconomic factors that directly contribute to these problems, that it's hard for us as coaches, especially as male coaches, to be able to put this messaging out there in a way that we're going to be seen as the authority figures, because there are the women that have 2.7 million followers and who are promoting detoxes and teas and be as small as you can and do yoga and Pilates instead of weights, because weights are going to make you bulky. Like, those messages unfortunately still exist.
I do hope. And I feel like it goes to what you said about, quote, misinformation. And I don't believe in policing, aggressively policing what gets said on social media. I believe that usually the people that find our way into our ecosystems that coach with us, I think men and women, a fair proportion of them have had goofy relationships with dieting. They have had goofy relationships with their body image, and they probably tried a variety of different things, and they probably at least been exposed to or actively consumed some of this messaging that frustrates us. But it's also been part of their journey to find their way to the better messaging. I mean, Dal, right? My client Dal, who is, Daljeet Chalal, nutrition coaching by Dal, she's now coaching people. She's great. She's lost 120 pounds. And, I give her all the credit for it. She found me partway through the nutrition changes to work on strength training. But she will talk about having done all the things that didn't work until she kind of was ready to change. And it goes back in the narrative stuff. So I think to aggressively try to stamp out all this, yes, in a perfect world, would I rather that it wasn't there? Yes, I would. Absolutely. Right. But, I think it's probably objectively way too hard to police it. And even we as an industry, flip-flop and, advance and adjust what we accept as, empirical truths when it comes to exercise science and nutrition. So it's tricky. And again, different things work for different people. I don't particularly like the idea of having someone going and doing keto, and I certainly don't love the idea of having clients doing carnivore, but at the same time, there are people that self-select to it and may feel better temporarily on it. I don't think it's a very good long-term solution, but I don't scream at people, fire and brimstone, say, no, these things are stupid. It's like, okay, cool. I want to keep trust with you. I want you to figure out why this feels okay. I really want you to understand the mechanisms at play here and set some guardrails. And then if something starts, certain things that usually dance against a guardrail start popping up, like some of the blood work issues, then you can be proactively on guard against this stuff. And then if it arrives, well, sure enough, okay, let's approach this with a better way. And maybe you feel better on carnivore, but maybe that's, and I talked recently with Sean Heisen about this, but maybe it's really because you just kind of did an elimination diet and there was something in there that just made you feel like shit and you removed it along with everything else. The baby went out with the bathwater. Well, maybe we can start bringing stuff back in and then we figure out what the one thing was that was actually causing the problems. You can bring back all the other stuff that's healthy, that's got fiber in it. You just don't have, maybe it's a FODMAP thing and maybe it's cherries, or maybe it's, for all the whatever about artificial sweeteners, maybe it's a sugar alcohol that just you really don't react well to. Okay, cool. Let's just, now we've identified, let's get that out of there. Maybe it's gluten. Maybe gluten was low grade shitty the whole time. You're not celiac. Maybe gluten just feels terrible. Okay, cool. Let's get it out of there.
Yeah, there's the human body is such a wild, complex, intertwined system that it would be impossible to ever try to tease out the best thing for the individual. The only way that an individual will really find their way to a solution is by really being aware of what their problems are in the first place. And most of them are habitual. They're not detail oriented. They're not, X's and O's of it's not the right macro split that's eluding them. It's not the right number of sets of reps that they're missing. It's usually just a lack of foundational consistency or foundational. And a lot of it is psychological issues that are going to impair decision making and make things more impulsive than they should be. And that's a hard thing to fight, man. Like, for a very long time when I was first coaching people 15 years ago, I was very much that you're lazy, you don't want it bad enough coach. And now I'm like, it's not because you're lazy, it's because you got 3 fucking kids. And it's because you have 2 jobs that are stressful and you're not a good communicator and you don't tell your partner what you need from them as far as help. And you internalize every problem until the point that it bubbles over and blows up and becomes a 2-week issue. And that's where most of this stuff comes from. It comes from a mental health issue that went unresolved, that then led to poor behaviors that just got away from you over a period of time. So I think when you start to tell people the truth about their problems, and when you say it in a way that's empowering and empathetic to them, and relate it back to some of your own struggles, because I'm not perfect either. Like, yes, I walk around with 10% body fat, but it's not work. I still have to try. I still have to, there's still nights where, like, I live in a weed legal state and I smoke pot every single night. So when I'm smoking weed and I have the munchies, like, I could very easily just jump on one of the 7 food delivery apps that I have and get whatever the hell I want, because in those moments, I don't care. I'm not thinking about my longevity. I'm not thinking about my body fat levels. I'm just like, I just want to eat whatever I want to eat because I'm in that headspace. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the essence of being human. That's human nature, is to be able to run towards pleasure and away from pain. And I think as long as people can stop flogging themselves for all these quote unquote bad decisions that they're making, and understand that in the moment that you made that decision, it actually served you. And I think Jeb does a great job of talking about this, where it's like, these are all of these stress coping mechanisms that are now ineffective were effective to you at some point. They protected you from a problem when you were having it, but you've evolved since then, and you need to evolve your systems as well. So a lot of times these things are a little bit more archaic than you want to give credit to. And that's where I think people need to do some self-auditing consistently, like once every 2 to 3 months. What do I know? What do I not know? Where do I need to go? How do I feel? What am I doing? What's my life look like? Like, I'm always constantly taking a temperature gauge of all this stuff, because I want to know that I'm always advancing and I'm always learning something about myself. Because people, I feel like they hit like 35 or 40, they have the job, they got the kids, they got the house. It's like, cool, I'm just going to mail it in now. I figured it all out. Like, no, you just got started. There's still so much life ahead of you. Like, I looked at my parents, like, they're in their late 70s. And you still can teach an old dog new tricks. Like, my mother had just got another health scare right before the event. And I talked to her in a very candid way the other day. And I said, Mom, I'm saying this to you selfishly because I don't want to sit at your bedside and watch you wither away and die. I don't have the bandwidth for it. It's going to destroy me at a very deep level. And I don't think it's fair to me, as a son who's been supporting you my whole life and been close to you my whole life, to watch you take 4 years to die. So unless you start making some measures to take care of yourself, it's going to be very hard for me to support you as you continue your decline. And she listened to me, man. Like, she's like, yeah, I know. Like, it's been worse lately. I haven't been taking the time to take my steps. I haven't been really watching what I eat. And I'm just a lot more sensitive and vulnerable than I ever was. I feel weak. I feel frail. And I'm like, Mom, good. The first step to changing any of it is recognizing your responsibility in it. You live in a place that you have 3 gyms. You have all the time in the world. You have more money than you've ever had. So you have resources now. Imagine what the next 20 years of your life can look like if you take some steps now to help yourself. And it was the first time that I'd ever actually saw her light up and feel hopeful towards it. And that was the thing that I'm like, okay, cool. An 80-year-old woman is capable of change. Anybody is.
I like that. And there's something there about having the level of trust to be able to push that particular button.
Dude, my father and I have always had a tough relationship. My mother and I are very close, as you saw at the event. Mm-hmm. Watching my father have to hold her up because she couldn't stand long enough. They think this is a woman that 10 years ago, she would run circles around you and I. Like, if she was at a mall or at a TJ Maxx or at a supermarket, like, she was flying by people, like, just flying 7 to 10,000 steps every single day, no problem, up and down the stairs, no issue. And within the last 10 years, because she had a pacemaker put in, coronary health obviously has gone downhill, but it's also because she's been a lot more sedentary and she's been sitting, like her tradition is she gets up in the morning, flips open her iPad, starts scrolling Facebook and eating dried fruit and nuts for the first hour. There's 1,500 calories right there of unmonitored eating. No water throughout the day, no strength training to speak of. And I'm like, Mom, I'm not asking you to train for 6 hours a week. I'm asking you to train for 30 minutes, 3 times a week with a guy who you're going to pay $25 an hour to show you how to use machines. That's all you need. Add another 1,000 steps every 2 weeks to your step count. Eat some fruits, eat some vegetables, have some lean protein in every meal, and then eat whatever you want the rest of the time. Like, I'm not asking you to overhaul. I don't need you to be perfect. I just want you to know and see and believe how much better you're actually going to feel by taking some of these small measures. And I think the problem with the fitness industry as a whole is that we start equating fitness to extremism. And we start equating, body image to like these extreme measures like bodybuilders. When in reality, like nobody needs to look like me. Nobody. This is like looking like me is not a necessity for being a healthy person. If anything, it's probably unhealthy. Like walking around ripped and lean and having all your muscles pouring out of your shirt is not the prerequisite for health. And our job, and I know the way you think the same way that I do, our job is not to make people the leanest people on earth. Our job is to make people the happiest and the healthiest people on earth. And that doesn't require a massive overhaul, extreme sacrifice, and extreme rigidity. It just means, where are my limiting factors and how can I make them less limiting?
Ooh, there's a lot there. This has been good. I like nuance, right? Nuance doesn't play super well on social media, but God, it's great for podcasting. If anybody wants a bit more of the deep dive into the older adult conversation, like I like this is just like having tough conversation with your parents, but for the tactical side of stuff, I had my friend Robert Linkle on the podcast recently, episode 348, guys. Go scroll. Robert, he's a beauty. He's just one of the nicest, most passionate people ever. I'm recording this, as of recording this today, I just had an article published on Muscle Fitness Magazine about a bunch of stuff that once you kind of get into like 50 and above, you actually have to start thinking about and changing your mindset and tactics for training. So message me, I'll give you that. This will be a couple of weeks later when it's released, but Aram, it's just great to have you on here. I always appreciate your perspective on things. You and I align very, very closely on all this stuff. So people can follow you at this handle you love, you're married to so much. The numeral 4, the word weeks, the numeral 2, and then the beach. 4 weeks to the beach. Just the numbers are actual numerals. So go find Aram on Instagram. Is there anything you want to direct people to? Any other resources other than what are the dates for the Real Coaches Summit next year?
I haven't signed the contract yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be April 26th to the 28th. It's like 99% certain.
And it'll be all over both of our media anyway. I've already bought a ticket to the advanced ones for people who had attended last year, so I'll be there. And I had a great time this time around. The last couple of years were incredible. And then speaking at it in year 1 was just dynamite. Anything else you want people to know about?
Well, this is something towards you, but I think what I'm probably going to do is by year 5, I'll do a greatest hits. So I'll bring back the presenters that people love the most and I'll put them back on stage. And that way it's going to be like a big like coming together party. And I think what's been cool about the event is, people like Nick Shaw and Luca Hocevar, who usually speak about business, actually spoke about their trade craft. They talked about hypertrophy training and hybrid training, which was such a refreshing topic because I know Nick was super excited to talk about training because Nick is a business guy, but he also has this large acumen and brain to talk about something that he was passionate about. And it was so cool finally seeing Luca talk about the stuff that he posts about on Instagram all the time. And like, I knew he was a good coach. I've always known that he was an amazing hybrid trainer, but actually watching him flex that muscle on stage was so awesome. So I think what the spirit of the event has done is it's led people back to their roots and it's kind of brought everybody back to where they started. And I think that's what makes it such a unique experience because, at some point, Luca was one of those guys sitting in those seats. You and I were people that were sitting in those seats and we still are. And it doesn't matter how many followers you've gained and how much notoriety and money you've made. You started because you were good at what you did and you became successful because you were good at what you did, not because you were able to sell it, not because you were an ultimately great marketer, because we know that those people burn out super, super fast. And the ones who stay in this industry the longest are the ones who are just really fucking good at what they do.
I already know exactly what I'll break down for you if we do year 5. So, of course, I'm in. Can't wait, but let's worry about year 4 first. You'll have a great lineup for it. Guys, make sure everybody's following Aram, and thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Little call to action. If you like this, if you like Aram's philosophy, if you're enjoying the podcast as a whole, put it in someone else's, inbox, someone you like, care about, that would enjoy these conversations. Guys, thank you so much, Aram. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man.